Well, welcome everybody. We are super fortunate to get this time with Kelly Cardenas, and he's just amazing. He's a Forbes contributor, an author, a podcaster, a founder of a national multi-million dollar brand, and a cultural efficiency coach. So what is that, Kelly? What's a cultural efficiency coach?
Well, what I find, Sean, is that 99% of challenges in any company, organizations, or even in relationships comes right back to culture. But it's the thing that we focus on the least, or we fail at the most, and we focus on the least. And my dad would tell me this all the time, that that thing that we fail at the most, and we fail at, or that we fail at the most, and we work at the least, was communication. And communication is at the core of every culture. And every time I go into a business, every single time I go into an organization, they tell me about all their challenges, and 99.9% of the challenges can be solved by looking at their culture, but it's not the popular thing to look at.
So we hear that word a lot, culture. So what is Kelly's definition of culture?
Well, it's a living, breathing organism, right? And so most people think it's a set of rules, or, it's some mantra that you put on the wall, some posters that you put up in the back room. But your culture is not what you post on the wall. It's how your people actually act. And, I talked about this to a friend the other day, and he had asked me about it. And I said, well, culture is, people always talk about core values, the core values of the company, or this and that. And I always ask for access to the people in the company. And then I ask them what the core values are. And if they can't do it like that, if they can't list them off immediately and tell you a story that's connected to them, they're not a core value. They're simply just something that the owner or the leader made up, and then everyone else should follow. It's got to be a living, breathing organism, meaning that there's two words. Number one is love. Number two is data. But I think that we get them switched around a lot. When we have love, right? We have love. We love the people, and we have data based off the systems. Then we manage the systems, as opposed to loving the system and managing the people. And this is a challenge that I ran into within my company. I fell in love so much with the systems that sometimes I managed the people. And when you get it wrong, then the place starts to have a completely different culture. And even when we talk about culture, even the companies who think that they don't, they say, oh, we just need culture. No, you already have one. If your people are showing up late, if they're dressing out of dress code, if you're not selling take home, if you're not upgrading, that's a part of your culture. That's the behaviors that your people are doing. So I find that, it's so easy to be able to see the culture, because it's just the way that people behave, not what people are saying that they believe.
So if talk to that salon owner that has maybe a bad culture. How do they switch it? What does that first step look like?
Well, I think the first step is, as leaders, as a salon owner, number one, as a salon owner, I want you to know there's no bad cultures. It's just you're performing at 100% based off of what you intended to do. And most of us as salon owners are so focused in on doing hair, or, selling take or whatever it is, that we don't sit down long enough to be able to figure out, what is it that we ultimately want? What is it that what's the result that we ultimately want? And when we have that, and then we work backwards and we put things in line, say we want to have happy people in the place, or we want to have joyous people. We've got to put things in line that will help that to be. And so there's ways to be able to manipulate your vibe. But I think that the biggest part, if there's a challenge in the culture, right, the leader has to look at themselves. They have to look at themselves and say, like, okay, well, we're this loving, inclusive, uplifting culture. Are you treating your wife that way? Are you treating your husband that way? Are you treating your kids that way? If you're not, what's going to happen is people are going to find you out at some point. And, people talk about it all the time, as far as like, when you scratch the surface, and that's, I don't think that we can ever be perfect. But I think that when we want to improve a culture, we must look at ourselves first as leaders and as owners.
Ooh, and that can be hard to take that look at ourselves. So talk about when you said that you went to managing your people till you fell in love with the systems. How did you look at yourself, and what was that moment that you're like, all right, I gotta switch it on?
Well, I think that it goes in ebbs and flows. And that's where I want to, number one is, with salon owners or leaders, you got to give yourself grace. You got to give yourself tons and tons and tons and tons of grace, because you're not going to perform at 100% all the time. My situations generally happened from people leaving. And I had generally as hairdressers, they leave in threes. But if you're like me, then you've had walkouts. And I want you to realize that those walkouts had nothing to do with the people. It had all to do with the fact that I got so focused on the system and not, and I loved the system so much. And I thought, because I knew the system would bring me results. But what I did there is I shifted the focus. And I tell you, when you love people, or when you love people, you manage the system, meaning that you put the system in play. You don't fall in love with it. It's a living, breathing organism, meaning that it can change up. Like if we have a system that says that you have to be there, 30 minutes beforehand, before time goes, that's a system. I can manage that system as long as I've communicated at a high level before that situation ever happens. If I don't communicate it, what happens, Sean, is the person shows up 29 minutes before. Well, in their culture, in their family, the way that they were raised, if they were 5 minutes early, then they were really, really on time. But if I didn't communicate that clearly, and what I would suggest with owners, with leaders, with just hairdressers, slow down, pump the brakes, give yourself some grace, and communicate at a super high level. Can I tell you a quick story about my daughter last night?
Yeah.
Okay. So my daughter wants an e-bike. She wants it more than anything right now. She does. She's 13 years old. So it changes like within the minute. But she wants this e-bike. This e-bike is about $1,300. Now, a 13-year-old e-bike is like a motorcycle. And my wife and I were talking to her about the safety, how she had to raise, make half the money, and we would bring in the other half the money. And she was so disappointed. She was so mad. She was like, every time I talk about an e-bike, you guys talk about safety, you talk about money, you talk about all these things, and you're not excited for me. And I sat with her and I said, well, what's the challenge here? And we started to talk. And as we started to talk, I asked her questions. And then I went into this whole dissertation. You need to respect things. You need to learn the value of work. You need to be safe. And we're your parents and all this stuff. Then we go on a dog walk. And as we're walking, she turns to me and she's like, Dad, it has nothing to do with the e-bike. And I said, what does it have to do with? And she's like, I've just been comparing myself to a lot of my friends. And I was like, okay, so what does that have? And I'm thinking in my head, what does this have to do with an e-bike? But what I found was one of her other friends got an e-bike, and she was saying, I'm struggling with comparison, Dad, because I keep thinking that I need to be better than anyone else. And so I keep doing that. But every time I become better than one person, then another person pops up and I have to be better than them. And so by communicating, taking the time and communicating, guys, is a sender, a receiver, and results. And if you're not getting the results, which I wasn't with my daughter, she was just shutting off when I was talking about safety and I was talking about responsibility, that I had to realize that I was the sender of the message. The receiver, right? The receiver, you can never blame the receiver, because I wasn't speaking in her language. And when I went on the dog walk and I allowed her to talk, then I found out it had nothing to do with the e-bike. And this is what happens in cultures, in salons all over the place. Oh, you're coming down on me. You're doing this, you're doing that. And here comes the owner. You need to sell more take home. You need to upgrade your guests. You're not performing at this high level. And the person is like screaming out, like, my husband is not treating me well. But they're not screaming it out through those words. They're screaming it out through their actions. They're showing up late. They're being nasty to their coworkers. They're not cleaning up. They're not doing these things. But maybe their daughter is struggling. And so when we love the people, right, and we manage the system, magic can happen. But when you flip it around the other way, believe me, you could lose tons and tons and tons of people.
You mentioned a walkout. So
Which one?
So I know that, a lot of times that's a fear of salon owners. And that's a lot of times why maybe they don't put certain things in place, because they don't want to like ruffle the feathers. So talk about the reason you put systems in place, and talk about after that walkout happens, how you recover. Because clearly you said it, you've had a few, and you're still super successful, and you're still killing it, and you're still doing it. So it is possible. It's not the end all be all when a walkout happens.
Well, I think number one is it's okay. Like, it's inevitable. It's not that don't let it be a fear. It's a reality. It's going to happen. And what I would suggest is I take the wisdom from Nick Saban, right? Imagine Nick Saban. He's probably one of the most disciplined and he's one of the most successful coaches in college football history. If you're not a football fan, college football fan, which most of you as salon owners aren't, I know this. But what I want you to know is he's one of the greatest coaches of all time and everyone wants to be a part of his program. Why is that? Because he's got discipline, right? And he's got discipline, he's got systems, and he can plug and play whatever person that comes into his environment. If they work inside the system, they'll be successful. He has more draft picks than anybody else in college. Like every single year they go into the NFL and they become pro. So what I would say to you is, make your system like a Nick Saban's, meaning that you have a championship pedigree. And if somebody comes in contact with you, then they're going to be a champion. And this was a thing that I decided very early on. Sean, you were with me from the very beginning. I didn't pull any punches with it. I wasn't for everyone, and every salon owner out there, you're not for everyone, and that's okay. It's not for everyone. And as long as you set your standards, it doesn't like they should be high in your world, not in anybody else's world. Don't look at my culture and be like, yo, we need to be just like so-and-so, because then you're going to love the systems and manage the people. Think about your environment. Think about where you're at. What result do you want to have? For me, I wanted the 4 seasons. I wanted ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. Now, in the professional beauty industry, where most people barely graduate from high school or is a second career or whatever it is, this is not the standard always, which I knew that I wasn't going to be able to hire everybody, but that's okay. And so I would suggest, and I would encourage, like, pump the brakes. Right. And when I say pump the brakes, choose mastery. Choose mastery. When you choose mastery and choose to become a master of something, everything slows down. And when everything slows down, you can see things a lot clearer and things start coming to you. And masters are not in a rush. And I would encourage, this is the last thing I'm going to say on this. Now we could continue to talk about it, but this is the last part of this, this story that I would tell you is when you do have a walkout. And guys, I coach people all over the country, all over the world about this. They call me. And I know a person, and you know a person that called me when there was a walkout. And she's probably listening. You know exactly who you are. And I said, calm down, chill out. You know who you are. And what most hairdressers and salon owners think is, oh my gosh, I had a walkout. I need to change everything. No, you don't. Those people just weren't for your environment. Now, is it a chance to get better and look at yourself? Absolutely. But please don't hit the panic button. Choose mastery, slow it down, and realize that you're on a great trajectory, right? It's going to take a little adjustments, but just like the pandemic, please, please, please. Everyone was like, oh my gosh, I need to change everything. No, you don't. You just need to shift maybe 1 degree, and 1 degree shift over a period of time is going to be a massive change.
I love that. I always talking to you. You just have the best wisdom always. And you talked about your hiring process and how you're not for everybody. And clearly, as you know, as you're coaching salons, we're having kind of a hiring challenge. It's kind of, it's not exactly back in the day where it was like you had a salon and people just lined up to come there. It's a little different now. So what would you recommend looking at hiring now?
Well, number one, I would look at getting involved in your community. Get involved in your community as much as you humanly possible. Get involved if your kids go to schools, elementary school or, middle school. Get in contact with that school and be involved. Volunteer, be around. What you'll start to do is you'll start to gain a great name in the community. Also, your local beauty schools, not just the Paul Mitchell schools, but every school. Go in and teach. And what I want to encourage every one of you guys out there, because a lot of people who listen to this podcast are people who own salons, who employ people. Okay. And I want to encourage you, because everyone's like, oh my gosh, the industry's changed. No, it hasn't. It's shifted, but for the good of those who own salons, who employ people, because sometimes you're the only show in town. There's a salon in Las Vegas called Style and Grace. There's 2 young ladies, Jen and Shauna, who bought the salon from myself and my wife. And they are one of the only commission-based salons in all of Las Vegas. Okay. Now, for me, now you can go into the, oh, I'm just going to switch up everything and I'm just going to change everything about my business. Or you could say like, I'm not competing with anyone now. And then look at the smallest viable audience that you possibly can have. Most people think about the masses, and especially with social media, we're always thinking about how can I, market to this person, market to that person. What I would suggest is market to the person right in front of you. And it's the 10-10 rule, Sean, that my dad taught me. The 10-10 rule goes like this. If I'm completely present with the person in front of me, meaning the school that I go and volunteer at, or the hair school, or the elementary school, or the middle school, or the high school, or that I'm involved with the charity organization. And what I would say to every single salon owner, come close to the screen, come close to the screen, get involved with the Chamber of Commerce. This is the greatest advice that I could give to any business. Get involved with your Chamber of Commerce, because this is like shooting fish in a barrel. I guarantee you, you will be the coolest person at the Chamber of Commerce event. And when you do, here's the 10-10 rule. One person, be present with them. That one person is either going to send 10 to you or send 10 away from you. And if I'm present, watch this. If I'm present with one person, they send me 10. Those 10 come in, I'm present with those 10. I now have 100. I'm present with those 100 individually. Now I have 1,000. It's exponential growth. But what we do right now, because of social media and because of marketing and because of advertising and because of all these things, we disregard the person who's right in front of us. And we ask them, hold on for a second while I film you. Hold on for a second while I record you. Hold on for a second while you look good in this light. And I'm going to market to 1,000 people about you, but I'm going to make you feel like garbage because you're not important to me. Make that person feel important. And so when you're going to hire people, there's a couple of things. Number one is have hiring events. Now, a hiring event has threefold benefits. Number one, all the people who come in, invite them all in a group interview. All those people will see, wow, I want this job because someone else wants it, right? This is normal human behavior. Number two, okay, when they're competing against each other, they're like, wow, this is the place to be. Number two, you're going to have all of your staff at the event, and all the staff is going to say, wow, there's 25 people who want my job. My job must be cool. And number three, talk to all of your guests about how many people came to the hiring event. And now your guest will become an evangelist of your gospel. And anyone who's going into the professional beauty industry, now your guest is saying, oh, wow, you should go and see, the salon. You should go and see, Betty's Beauty Barn, wherever you're at. And if you start to do that, you could switch the paradigm from most salon owners right now are like, oh my gosh, I can't find employees, right? But what if we switched the paradigm and they started looking for you? It's the difference between push marketing and pull marketing. I would much rather have that reputation and name in the community where people are pulling themselves to me, as opposed to me pushing out everything that I possibly can. Again, choose mastery, slow down, and stop the hustle, because the hustle makes people run away. Mastery makes people find you.
What I love about your hiring events is, you would have them in Las Vegas, but people would travel all over the place to be there. I mean, it was like a convention to go to Kelly's hiring events. And I think that goes back to something that you and I have talked about a lot, and that's building the brand. And of course, I'm never going to not have a conversation with you about that, because I think you are somebody who did it literally in front of my eyes. Like I remember you when you started out, and then your logo just was everywhere, and you were at events with stickers, and everybody just knew who you were. And that's just the conversation that I want to kind of go to, is how important, not only how important is it building that brand, how do you sustain that brand? How do you figure out, like, where do you even start? Like, I mean, because everybody knows Kelly, like you are the brand. And I think you're one of my biggest mentors when it comes to anytime we think about branding a business. So who better to talk about that right now than you?
Well, I think the first one is you have to believe in it in your heart. Right. And my brother told me this a while ago. He had this brand. It was called MMA Appearances. And he asked me, he's like, how can I get people on board with this thing? And I asked him, I said, do you wear the shirt? And he was like, well, what do you mean? Because he's a lawyer and he was doing, it was like a little side hustle. And I said, do you wear the shirt? He said, no. And he's like, why would I wear my own shirt? That would be like, you know, like Motley Crue wearing a Motley Crue shirt. And I said, well, why would anyone else wear it if you wouldn't? And so people are looking for you to believe in it wholeheartedly. And people talk about this all the time, especially in today's society where they're like, oh, I've got a brand. I've got a brand. You don't have a brand if you made a logo. You don't have a brand if you have a t-shirt. And so it's the commitment, right? And so when you commit to what it is that you're doing, but before you commit to what you're doing, you have to know what you want to do, right? And so when I first set out, I said, I want to create at first I said, I want to create the highest paid hairdressers in the whole industry. And then I started to have to drill it down to why. Like, why did I want to do that? And what I figured out was that I wanted to create great people in their communities that happen to do hair. Right? I wanted to speak life into kids that maybe didn't have an opportunity before. Now, what was one component of that? One component of that was to say, you know, hey, you have to do well financially, right? But that was just a part of it. So I had to drill down. So make sure that you understand, like, and know why you're doing what you're doing. And the why part is very large and people talk about it all the time and, you know, and that, but honestly, your why just has to be, you know, connected to you. I think you've heard this before from me, Sean, but the only reason why I wanted to be successful and make any money or be successful in business or anything like that is because I wanted to go to the carnival and I wanted to play until I won. That was it. And I still stick to that today because it gives me the freedom to do the silly things that I want to do. And I want to encourage every single person out there that your brand has to be signature to who you are. You can't fake the funk. Like you can't, because people are going to find you out. And I talked about it before. Like I asked this kid and I don't know if I've told you this before, but I was in New York and I was with Ted Gibson and there was a little kid. When I say a little kid, he was a younger guy and he was like the artistic director or whatever. And I asked him, I said, what's your exit strategy? And he looked at me and got offended. He was like, I'll never leave here. I said, no, you don't understand what I'm saying. I'll slow it down. What's your exit strategy? Meaning the X marks the spot. How can you put an X on yourself where you become the treasure, where your brand becomes the treasure? X it. Like, have you X'd your brand? You know, on a map, a treasure map, there's an X and that's where the treasure is. Have you put an X on your brand that people want to go to it and be able to see it? And what I find is that it goes through three things. Number one, or five things. Number one is wisdom. Wisdom is just the respect of what you're doing and why you're doing it. Number two is knowledge. Once you respect what you're doing and where you're going and why you're doing it, once you respect that, you start to gain knowledge of all the things that are in line with you getting to that point. The next one is once you gain the knowledge, you start to get understanding. And when you understand things, then it changes things to a whole different, complete level. When you start to understand things, it drops you into discernment, meaning, Sean, there's all kinds of opportunities for you, but you don't take them all because you sit back and you discern and say, this isn't for me. And then the last one is discipline. And see, discernment will bring discipline because the more and more that you say no to something because it's not in line with your brand, but you won't know what's in line with your brand until you have understanding, before you have knowledge, before you have wisdom. Wisdom is just the right use of knowledge, but wisdom comes from the respect of why you're doing what you're doing. And so when we go wisdom, we go knowledge, we go understanding, we go discernment, we go discipline. Now I have the discipline to get up in the morning when no one tells me to get up anymore. And that becomes a part of what your brand is. And what I would say is a couple actionable items. Number one, if you have a personal social media and you have a professional social media, ask yourself why. And I've done this for years and years and years, and this is not popular. Ask yourself why. Oh, because I don't want people in my business. Okay, well, then you don't want people in your business. And what I would say is, guys, and I lost people. I lost people, Sean, a lot because I was very adamant about social media. But you know what? I just had someone tell me just recently, I said, well, Why didn't you hire? This was just the other day. I was consulting a salon and I called him. A person asked me, can I get a job in Las Vegas? Do you know anyone? And I said, well, I sold the salon. And, so I talked to my friend and they said, I'm not going to hire the girl. And I was like, why? I said, and they said, because I checked her social media. And I was like, what? And she said, I checked her social media. I watch what she does. There is no way that she's in line with who we are as a brand, because they know who they are as a brand. But again, what I would encourage all of you, pump the brakes, right? Respect, meaning fear. Like when I say fear, it's respect. So respect why you're doing what you're doing. The how will come when you understand the why and the what, right? So you never have to focus on the how. For me, my brand, Sean, there was sometimes I did stickers and then, it didn't work. And I said, shit, okay, let's try something else. Let's try patches. And then patches were like, oh man, patches are working amazing. Then I tried a couple shirts and the shirts, I did one that said, don't call it a comeback, because I had been with a company with Paul Mitchell for years, but then people were like, oh, you're coming back. I was like, don't call it a comeback. But I was saying like, LL Cool J, don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years, but the shirt didn't work. It didn't sell. And so I was like, man, okay, let's try another one. And you can continue to iterate in your brand as long as it stays in line with why you're doing it in the first place and what you set out to do. And so when we respect that, we gain knowledge on it, we gain understanding, we gain discernment, and then we have discipline. And I tell you, the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is two things. Number one, capacity, and number two is discipline. And when you have the capacity to accept the greatness that you already have inside you, as opposed to trying to accomplish it, and then you have the discipline to tell yourself that I'm not going to take every single deal because it's not who I am, even though it'll make me tons of money, then you start to have a brand that people say, like, I want to have that because it has integrity. Integrity is nothing more than being the same in the dark as you are in the light.
Dropping those words of wisdom, always. Sandra actually posted, thank you for this valuable information. I needed to hear these reminders. Sometimes I let the noise get in and I lose my focus. So kind of talk to Sandra about not letting the noise get the best of her. Give her some advice.
Well, it's Sandra, you said, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So Sandra, number one, I want to tell you, you're awesome. Never compare yourself to anybody else but yourself right now. Don't even compare yourself to yourself yesterday, because you can't live up to it. And sometimes you'll either live up to it, or you're going to degrade the memory of yesterday because you're going to try and smash it. And when you crush things, this is the big word, like, I'm going to crush my goals. Well, when you crush one thing, you injure another. And so just be conscious of this and be gentle with yourself, have grace with yourself, and realize that you're awesome. You are not your accomplishments. You are not your accomplishments. I'll say it one more time. You are not your accomplishments. You will never, never, never accomplish success. You can accept it, but you'll never accomplish it. Every single person that I've ever met in my life that set a goal, they hit the goal, and then you know what they did? They followed it up with another goal. But a person who has a vision, meaning that I accept my greatness, I have a vision of who I am, and understand as a salon owner, a stylist, a manager, who you are is awesome. Doesn't matter if you have a good week, a bad week, whatever it is, because salon owners are notorious for having a good week and being like, yay, I'm going to put all these procedures in place. And then having a bad week and being like, I need to change everything. And then I had a good week, and then I had a bad week, and then I had a good week, and then I had a bad week. I had a good month, and then I had a bad month. I had a good year, and I had a bad year. And there's no consistency in the brand. Like, Sean, when I was losing money, when I first started off, when I was zeroed out with all my accounts, I was still awesome. Why? Because my mom told me that. I was just awesome and I was broke. But that's okay. And there's going to be, but me making money didn't make me more awesome. I was still the same dude. So Sandra, you're awesome. Number two, you're beautiful. Don't compare yourself to anything else, or anyone else, including yourself, on the present day right now, because you can live up, if you're present 100% right now. If you can live up to that 100%, and you get 100% score on being you right now, present, because there's no other comparison to that. Respect and reverence the past, accept the future, and reside in the present. Respect and reverence the past. It's already done. Accept the future. All the things you desire, Sandra, guess what? They're going to happen in 29 years. 29 years ago, I was like, oh, I'm going to hustle and grind and do all these things. And I had all these desires in my heart. And guess what? They all happened, but I didn't make them happen. I had to get to a point where I had the capacity to accept it. Last one. Sandra, you can do anything. You can do anything that you put your mind to, but there's a caveat. Just because you could do it doesn't make it your purpose. So I go back to the 5. Seek wisdom, seek wisdom, seek wisdom. Wisdom is the fear, like the fear and respect. You will gain wisdom from the fear and respect of God. And when you understand who he is, and you understand that he made you and he doesn't make any junk and he didn't start with you, then you'll start to gain knowledge. When you gain knowledge of him, meaning that he's never lied, he's never going to do that, he's never created any mess, and he didn't start with you, then you start to have understanding. Oh, wow, I should accept that I'm awesome. I should accept the fact that I should not be in a rush. I should pump the brakes. I should be in mastery, right? And once we gain that understanding, then we slow down and we start looking at things and we're like, I'm not in a rush. I don't need anything from you. I don't need a guest right now to come in and get everything. Why? Because I'm going to know you for 20 years. So I don't need to upgrade you, take advantage of you, put extensions in your hair today. Why? Because over the next 20 years, you and I are going to be like family. You and I are going to create such an amazing relationship that when I say you should get extensions, you're going to get them. Why? Because you trust me. And that's that discernment. When I have that understanding, it moves me into discernment, meaning I don't need to move on everything. I can sit back, I can wait on it, I can do that. And then I go into discipline. And when that discernment turns into discipline, now that discipline tells me that I need to keep respecting the reason why I was here in the first place. And then it gets me on that circle. Wisdom, knowledge, understanding, discernment, discipline, and then it goes circle all the time, all the time. And if we do this, then we'll stay humble enough to realize that all the systems that we put in play were nothing more than a list of our screw ups, and we won't get focused on them, Sean. We'll stay focused on the people, loving the people, and the people will constantly change because you cannot scale people.
That was amazing. And she says, thank you. And she says that you're amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You mentioned the word humble. And I really want you to talk about that, because throughout all the years I've known you, you've always been that. Like you've never changed. Like I've always seen you as like, you're just like, yeah, I'm Kelly. I'm awesome. Like that's like, you've stayed there through all of your success, through your books, through being in Forbes, to your podcast, to your salon. Like you've been Kelly. You've never been out of reach or too big. You know, no, you've always just been that, like, how can I serve you? So talk a little bit about that.
I think, Sean, it's about getting your butt kicked. And I appreciate the acknowledgement. I appreciate what you're saying. But there's been times, man, in my career where my ego got the best of me, man. And where I love, like, I love the system. And I was like, look, you boneheads, you know, like, and I could tell you, I have a hair cutting system. Seriously, to all you hairdressers out there and all salon owners out there, like, I have a system that will work every single time. Every single time. Any hair cutter, any hairdresser in the world, I can teach you within 6 sections, 11 minutes that it takes to create long layers. I've got the tools to be able to do it, and literally created millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars in revenue, not just from my own staff, but from staff all over the country. And it's so simple. Now, when I say it's simple, it's not easy, but I fell so in love with that a lot of times I'd get my butt kicked. I'd put expiration dates on people, and that's where it got hurt. And so it's over time, just getting my butt kicked a ton. And, but also realizing not who I am, Sean, but whose I am, and realizing that honestly, like God told me in 1997, he gave me Romans 9:17, which is, he put Pharaoh in this place, that when Pharaoh spoke, then the people would listen. And when they listened, they'd hear God's voice and not Pharaoh's. And I was like, and I heard that, I was like, okay, cool. What does that mean, God? And he said, Kelly, I'm going to put you in a place where when you speak, the people are going to listen. And when they listen, they're going to hear my voice and not yours. And then he followed it up with the story of King Herod Agrippa, King Herod Agrippa was like, yo, the people were shouting, and they said, that's not the voice of a man. That's the voice of a God. I'm getting chills while I'm saying this right now. And King Herod Agrippa just heard it. And it kind of sounded good. He didn't say anything, but he just heard it. It sounded good in his heart. And God struck him dead just like that and had his body eaten from the inside out with maggots. Now, in 1997, at 21 years old, that's a nasty story. And it was so graphic. I was like, wow, God, why would you tell me that? And he said, because if you ever think that it's your voice that people are hearing, I'm going to take it all away. And so that's been that reminder over and over again. And he told me that, one time I was swimming in the ocean, he took me out and I was swimming in the ocean. And sometimes when you get in the ocean, you get a little bit far out and you're just swimming and you don't realize, and then you look back at the shore and you're like, wow, I'm so far away. I can't see anything. He said, I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to take you to a place where you don't even see land. And then I'm going to make the seas rough. And when the seas are rough, you can have me to hold on to, but if you don't hold on to me, then you're going to drown, and I'm going to be your only help. And that's been where it's been. I literally, I haven't known how I was going to do it. I didn't know how all these things are going to happen. He gave me a thought, or he gave me a vision. What was it? 3 years ago. And he said, you're going to speak in front of a small audience or a small theater. Then you're going to speak at the House of Blues or a like venue, 3,000 to 5,000. Then you're going to speak at the Mandalay Bay Event Center, which is going to be 10 to 13,000. Then you're going to speak at the Madison Square Garden or a like venue, 17 to 19,000. And then it's going to culminate in a Soldier Field or a like venue that's going to hold 100,000. And I was looking at him at first. And I was like, I just said, I was so excited at first. And then I was like, what am I going to say? And he said, I'll tell you when you get there. And that kind of situation, he constantly puts me in places where I cannot perform. I cannot get myself through, and I have to hold on to him. And that's where, my butt stays as humble as possible, because I know if I get out of line, he's going to snatch it all away. And I don't like him to do that because he's done it before.
So as we kind of wrap up here today, first, I just want to thank you for joining us. How can people get a hold of you and follow you? Because you're always posting the most inspirational, motivational things.
Well, I appreciate you on Instagram. It's at The Real Kelly Cardenas. Please help my TikTok game. It's The Real Kelly Cardenas 23. My daughter's 13 and she doesn't think her dad is that cool. So if you could help me out on TikTok, it'd be great. The website, kellycardenas.com. There's also kellycardenassalon.com. And stay in touch that way. We got an audio book coming out, and I'll tell you this, Sean. The audio book is called Success Leaves Clues, because I've just studied successful people for my whole entire life, and I find that they all leave clues, and there were 7 little things that if you become aware of them, you can shift your reality. And the reason why I did it is because I wanted to. I checked it out. I was like, wow, I want to try an audio book, and then I figured out how to do it. And people were like, well, what if it doesn't work? And I was like, if it doesn't work, then I'll just try it again. You know what I mean? I'll make it better. So I want to give you all the permission to try something today, and be okay. Be okay to try it. And if it doesn't work, don't do it anymore. If it works, write it down, systemize it, and then continue to do it. But please don't fall in love with that system. Fall in love with the people, manage the systems.
Yeah. So final thing that's on your heart this morning that you want to get out there to salon owners and leaders.
Well, give yourself tons of grace. Tons and tons and tons of grace. Forgive yourself. All the goals that you could ever have in your whole entire life mean nothing if you don't have a vision. And that vision, guys, that vision should be so clear. That vision should be so clear. And a guy told me, Larry, the Uber driver, told me this. He said, if you don't have a vision, you could take any road you want, because they all lead to the exact same place, which is nowhere. And I want to invite you, throw the goals off to the side until your vision is clear. Once your vision is clear, your goals can be in line with that. Your milestones will be in line with that. And then the one thing that I think every one of us should focus on every day, every single day, is the inch stones. Focus on the inch stones and start to celebrate. Celebration will bring joy. When that joy comes in, make sure there's tons of grace, because joy, guys, is not happiness. Joy is falling in love with your current circumstances and allowing magic to happen.
Perfectly put. Thank you again, Kelly. It's always a pleasure to hang out with you. I appreciate you, and I hope you have an awesome rest of your day.
I love you, Sean. I love what you're doing, man. You're awesome.
Bye, everybody.